Good afternoon and welcome to New York State Bridge Authority meeting. Before we proceed with our meeting, we're going to our committee of the whole on behalf of the Audit Committee and the Finance Committee. And Commissioner Higgins, will you kindly chair both of those committees, please?
Thank you. Can we, Carl, is it all right if we adopt the minutes jointly of the Audit and the Finance Committee?
Sure.
So first order of business is to adopt the minutes of the December 18 Audit Committee and Finance Committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Next is review of Toski Company's annual report. Brian, you want to make the appropriate introductions? Or?
Yes, I do. Okay, today we have with us Tim Thomas from the firm Toski & Company, our auditors, to review our annual report. He's going to go through a number of items related to responsibilities as it relates to year-end.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for inviting us down. We appreciate the opportunity, even though we do not engage in a substantial amount of interaction with you folks. It's important that we have this meeting because we work for you. We report to you, and as an Audit and Finance Committee, you're charged with making sure that things happen the way you intended for them to happen. And so we're here to talk about that stuff. There's three things that we provided you. In the package, the first one at the top says report to board. And what that is there are a number of items that we are required to communicate to you as your auditors. We have two options. We can communicate them orally or we can communicate them in writing. The vast majority of the time, the rules makers stay out of the way and give us tons of latitude to decide how we're going to do our job. When it comes to this particular communication, it either has to be in writing, or if I provide it to you orally, I actually have to write and retain a memo. Now, figure the odds of that happening. That's not going to happen. So as long as you have to write it down anyways, it makes more sense just to provide you with a written document. Now, were we to have any issues with anything, this is where we would talk about them. And there are some specific things that we talk about. Significant accounting policies. Your significant accounting policies are in note 2. Yeah. When it comes to accounting, a lot of times it's bean counting. There are a lot of different ways you can account for the beans. Were there any issues that we had or any changes that you made, we'd be telling you about them here. There aren't any. Accounting estimates, that's another thing that we have to talk to you about. Basically, you're a little different than a lot of other entities as a whole, in that you account for your bridges under the modified approach, which means you maintain them at a certain level. You don't depreciate them, except for the walkway over the Hudson. And all the costs of maintaining them are current year period costs, and we'll talk about what that means later. But we talk about those accounting estimates. Probably the biggest one is what your condition of your bridges are. And we're comfortable with all the estimates that you made, where there were situations where you'd make them. We talk about the significant disclosures. The biggest ones relate to commitments and contingencies in Note 13. We think your financial statements are consistent and appropriate, and the disclosures are as transparent as they need to be. Difficulties in performing the audit. If Brian gave us a hard time, this is where we'd be telling you. He didn't. They're
probably the only one in the room who would ever say that.
I was offered a considerable bribe, but I didn't. But Brian's got nothing to hide. He's very cooperative, and he made it easy for us.
Happy to hear that.
Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Okay, what does that mean? Sometimes we find something, and there are some people that will go to great lengths to talk us out of making an adjustment. Or sometimes we'll find something that is significant, but not significant enough to cause the financial statements to be materially misstated. If we had uncovered anything like that, we would be required to tell you. That's not the case. What you see is what you get here. It is what it is. There's no big disagreements. And the next, which brings us to the next one, disagreements with management. We weren't in disagreement with management over the application of any of the accounting principles that would apply here. We didn't have a knockdown drag out over anything. We didn't even disagree about any of the potential accounting treatments where there were options. And I think it's important to note that where there were options, we feel you picked the most appropriate ones. Management representations. At the end of the audit, we ask for a letter. It's about 6 pages long. Essentially, at the end of the day, it says, we didn't lie, cheat, or steal, and if we did, we told you about it. Brian didn't give us any hassle with that. He just signed it. Which, that's good. That means
You're saying he did or didn't?
he did sign it. Management consultations with other independent accountants. In the old days, this was, the word was opinion shopping. And what people would do is they'd say, here's the issue I got. How are you guys going to handle that? And if they didn't like how we proposed we were going to handle it, they'd go to the next guy until they found someone. Or, if there was a contentious issue, go out and ask someone else what they thought and then use it as a club to beat us over the head with it. The theory is, if that happens, those people are supposed to call us to make sure that they have the whole story before they give any advice. That didn't happen either. Other audit findings or issues, we have no issues. Things are really clean. I used to have a client that I did an audit for, and there was a guy that he'd been a farmer for 50 years. And I figured that meant he was a pretty good businessman because he managed to do it for that long. And he always wanted to know, no matter how long I talked, is everything okay? And that's an important question. And everybody wants to know that, just not everybody asks that. And yeah, I think everything's okay. And there was another guy that sat on that same board that was a retired state trooper. And so his question always was, did you catch anybody stealing anything? Not at your company this year. And the same answer applies. And those are two really good questions. And if I was sitting in your chair, those are the two questions I'd want to know. And the answer to both of them is not even close. You got nothing to worry about. If that's boring, I suppose that's a really good thing. And then the last thing is the other stuff that's in the financial statements. It's all consistent and it all agrees and makes sense. The next letter is 1 page long. That's really good. This is where if there was a problem in your internal controls, and internal controls is the big word that means the policies and procedures, checks and balances, the things that you put in place to make sure that what happens is what you intend to happen, to make sure that in as much as possible your assets are safeguarded from theft, loss, or misappropriation. And your controls here are really tight. And we don't think that there's any significant deficiencies or, more significantly, material weaknesses in your control system that could allow something to happen that was unintended. Now, a part of that whole system of internal control comes from the tone at the top. And that's important because that's where you collectively as a group fit in. And by setting the right tone, you encourage management to set the right tone and do the right thing. And you do. Following that is our auditor's report. It's really long. The biggest thing to take away from this is, our independent auditor's report is the first 2 pages. And the report looks a little different than it did when I first started in this profession. In the late 80s, we decided that we were doing a really crappy job of communicating what an audit was. And they came out with all these standards that they called expectation gap standards, which was filling the gap between what an audit was and what people thought an audit was. The biggest piece of that was we never took any responsibility for fraud. Those expectation gap standards failed miserably, and when all of that stuff happened with Enron and Tyco and WorldCom and all that, and we as a profession got beat up pretty hard, we came out with a whole new look at things. Basically, even though we tried as hard as we could to say that we had no responsibility for fraud, we were being held responsible for it. So we said, fine, we will look for fraud and report it when we see it. You're a government. We don't stop there. We also look at abuse and bias. So there's a couple things that you need to know. We didn't find any fraud. We asked people about it, and no one had any concerns or issues. What's abuse? Abuse is like, let's say, for example, that you provided Brian with a company car. A Chevy would be appropriate. A Ferrari would be abuse. And there's nothing that we found that would be indicative of that. And then the least egregious would be bias. And that's when there's a way of looking at things, always looking at it in a way that consistently skews results. So that individually a bunch of decisions had no impact, but collectively they maybe paint a different picture than what really exists. You don't do that either. That's really important. Now, in our auditor's report, we've adopted this thing called the clarity standards, and our report follows the clarity standards. And the first thing it starts out with is, here's what we're doing. We're doing an audit of these financial statements. And then we affix what management's responsibility is. And in theory, we're responsible for the first 2 pages of this report, and all the rest is yours, and you're responsible for it. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on them, those financial statements, that they fairly state. I always tell people the only absolute ironclad 100% guarantee I can give you is that there's something wrong in these financial statements, because there's a bunch of estimates in there. We have accounts receivable in there. We have a provision for what we think is ultimately not going to be collectible. It's our best guess. We think it's a doggone good guess. But I absolutely positively guarantee you that when the dust settles and we got perfect 20/20 hindsight, we're going to be off. We're not going to be off enough, though, that it's going to cause anybody to change their mind on the financial position or condition of the authority. Similarly, accounts payable. Maybe one of you have an expense report, and you put on a jacket and you find a receipt in there or something, and it's not in here. We don't think there's anything in here that way that's going to cause anybody to change their mind about the authority. And so that gets us to the point where on the second page we can give our opinion, which says, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly the financial position and condition of the authority. There's some other language that makes reference to some other required information that's required to be in here because you're a government. Most of the rest of that stuff you've seen, and it's pretty straightforward. Following our opinion is management's discussion and analysis. And the concept of management's discussion and analysis is this is supposed to be like an executive summary of what happened in layman's terms. So you can read this and get an idea about where the authority's at, why it's where it's at, and then at the end, where it's going. And then, if you want additional information, you ask the treasurer, and that's how you get what you need to get. The biggest single thing in here is the modified approach for your infrastructure assets. You don't depreciate your bridges. With that takes us over to page 8, which is your statement of net position. In the government world, they changed the name of the financial statements several times during the past couple years. This is a balance sheet. This is like a snapshot at a point in time. Comparative, December 31st, 2014 and 13. The assets are what you have, the liabilities are what you owe, and the net position, that's your net worth. Now, when you look at it, the first thing you're going to see is, holy cow, our net position, our equity went from 84 million to 52 million. Way to go, Brian. But you've got to remember that
It's not my fault.
it's not his fault. You followed the modified approach for accounting for your bridges. So all of the stuff that would be capital is an expense when you do it. You're spending a lot of money down at the Newburgh Beacon Bridge. That's what's in here. It's important to know that you're pretty much tracking plan. Now, year to year, are you tracking plan? Not always so much. You can't control what happens with your contractors gearing up and getting ready to do a job. You can't control the fact that you're trying to paint and it's raining and you can't paint in the rain. There's things like that come into play. Bottom line, the fact that your net position went from 84 million to 53 million isn't a big deal. When you look at the middle section where it says restricted for, you'll see that under construction your net position, you had $58 million restricted for construction at the end of 13. That's down to $6 million. That's where your money went. It's important, I think, really important, to try to separate operations from construction. And on an operating basis, the big question is, are you bringing enough cash in the door to do what you need to do? And when you take out, if we go over to page 9, which is the statement of revenues and expenses, the income statement, when you look at the fact that your operating revenues went up $700,000, they were pretty consistent. A little bit of total increase and some other income, pretty consistent. Not a big concern there. A little bit more traffic driving that, since we know you didn't have a rate increase. But when you look at your operating expenses, they went up $22 million. Well, look at that line that says rehabilitation, reconstruction, and bridge repairs. That went up just barely shy $22 million. So there it is. It's right there. If it was on any other line, I would say, oh my, and I'd be concerned about it. If it's on that line, not at all, in any way, shape, or form. You're in good shape. So when you look at the decrease in net position, in effect, your net loss for the year of $32 million, it was a planned loss. It was right where you thought you needed to be, and it's not anything that I would be terribly, terribly worried about. You would expect that when you're doing major reconstruction on your bridges. The next page is a cash flow statement, and that basically shows where your cash came from and where it went. And I think the big thing there to know is that the payments to contractors was $58 million and change, and that basically was the construction work. That's where your money went. When you factor that into consideration, interestingly, your invested funds, money that you had set aside just for that, went down in almost $39 million, which paid for the biggest chunk of that. So your cash position really didn't change. You're in good shape. Bottom line, things are okay. Now, the basic financial statements are followed by our notes to the financial statements, and those drone on for pages and pages and pages, from page 11 all the way through 27. And what they do is provide additional required disclosures. This isn't where in fact, Brian wrote the financial statements, but this isn't where Brian goes all Edgar Allan Poe and puts in all kinds of extra stuff. There are required disclosures that are in here, and we pretty much stick to those. If there was anything that really stuck out or was significantly different from year to year, I would tell you about it. The biggest thing here is your concept, and I'll turn to that page. I just want to make sure we get there. On page 26 is required supplementary information, where we look at the condition of your bridges. And this is where we look at your bridges in terms of where they fall on the rating. Now, you decided that you want to keep them at a level 5 minor deterioration. And when you look at this over the last 3 years, you've kept every one of your spans at level 5, right where you're supposed to be keeping it. That's good news. That means you're doing exactly what you plan to do, and you're achieving the objective that you set out to achieve. So it's hard to be really critical of that. Then there's some additional information about that on page 27. On page 28, we talk about the other post-employment benefits. That's the promise to your retirees for health insurance. That's a big liability that gets parked on your balance sheet. It's not going to get paid out today. It's not going to get paid out tomorrow. It's going to get paid out over the next 20 or 30 years. Some of it sooner rather than later, depending upon when your employees retire. The one thing you'll see is the funded ratio is 0. You don't have any money set aside to pay for it. You're paying for it on a pay-as-you-go basis. That's something that requires a little finesse on Brian's part to make sure that he has enough money in the budget to cover those pay-as-you-go expenses as you incur them. But that's where we come down with that. The next 2 pages.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Just recently, didn't the state, in the last 3-4 years, pass something that we would have to fund that liability?
No, what you're talking about is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board came out with a new pronouncement. And you participate, and you're from Ulster County, so you'll have the same thing in your financial statements. You participate in the Employees Retirement System, which is a multi-employer defined benefit plan. You make contributions into the plan based upon what the plan tells you. There is an unfunded liability for that plan. Last year, I sat through one of DiNapoli's speeches, and he said that the plan was roughly 92% funded, which means that there's, of the actuarial value of the promises that are outstanding, there's 8% of them that they don't have any money to cover. That 8% is still a humongous number. In the past, the state never assigned that number to anybody. You never knew what your piece as the New York State Bridge Authority was of that 8% number. Starting next year, you're going to have to pick up your piece of that. Now, how are you going to know what that is? And every governmental agency or municipal governmental unit in the state is going to have to do that.
Now, that's for the pension. That's not for OPEB.
That's for the pension, correct.
And the OPEB is separately
that's never going to be
calculation
funded.
that's
right.
not funded anywhere.
And that's probably never going to be funded because the state is never going to allow you to do that.
Because the startup to do that would be just...
It would be horrendous.
So you're saying basically we have to make...
There's going to be...
The state determines what your pension cost is, and then there's additional unfunded that you're going to have to make another payment.
You're going to pick it up on your financial statements as a liability, like the OPEB. They're going to give you what that number is, and it'll just wind up knocking down.
So it's going to inflate the employer contribution rate on the pension system.
It's going to deflate your net position. It's going to deflate your
Because
equity.
it show as a liability.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean we're going to have to pay more into the employer.
There's no net cash difference. What will happen is we will park a liability on the
So this
balance sheet
OPEB
like
number
OPEB.
will, in theory, inflate as a calculation, as an actuarial number.
It'll be both OPEB and it'll be the retirement system liability for the unfunded component.
Now,
So there'll be another chunk that'll dump on next to the OPEB.
I had worked for the controller for a couple of years, and at one point the pension system supposedly was at 102% funded. What happens in that case? That the market is exploding.
Those Jaguars that everybody was driving?
The Lamborghini, yeah.
My guess,
Yes, sir.
it's never going to get above 100%. Regardless of where it is, they'll tweak an actuarial assumption And if you were,
No, I know.
an actuarial
Look,
assumption is a guess
They
based on
changed
a
the,
guess.
what the estimated investment rate was going to be from 8% down to 7% a few years ago, and that changed the whole.
And they just
impact.
changed the mortality tables that apply to defined benefit plans in the private world.
People are living longer, so therefore.
Yes. It's really interesting because the IRS actually has mortality tables. And if you go look at them, pretty much, at least before this latest adoption, we're all going to live to within, in their eyes, within 6 months of 83. No matter how old you are, you're going to live within 6 months of 83 is what their actuarial tables show. So, in theory, you're paying for a liability from the time someone retires, which if someone goes out at 62, you're paying for 21 years of whatever portion of their health insurance it is. And basically, they take that number, they calculate it forward, assuming what the costs are going to go up every year, and then they discount it back at present value. So pretty much you can take, if you're paying 50% and it's costing you $15,000 for health insurance, pretty much the liability you're going to wind up picking up is $7,500 times
Okay.
21 years
So at
for
the
whatever
end of the
portion
day-
they've earned so far.
At the end of the day, these two numbers under this unfunded liability of OPEB will affect the net position of the authority, but really, as far as cash, budgeting, doesn't.
No. The only place it's going to affect in terms of cash is as your older employees retire. If you had an engineer retire. Now, it's affecting you cash-wise because now you're actually paying his
Healthcare.
healthcare costs.
Well-
And you have a new engineer sitting at his desk, so now you're paying 2 healthcares instead of 1.
Jeff, you know how to know healthcare. Problem solved. Jeff, I mean, make this look big.
It's either you or the accountant. And sorry, Brian and I got the same jersey, so.
Fair enough.
But that's the only really thing coming down the road that's going to have an impact.
Understood. Thank you.
So, the last page, there's 2 more opinions that come on here, and we talk about internal control over financial reporting. Basically, because you're a government, on top of the regular auditing standards, we apply generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And basically, the big difference is we look at your internal controls a little more closely. And if we have issues, this is where we would be telling you about them. We don't.
Good.
Your control system is tight, and things are good there. And then the last one is, because you're a New York State authority, we have to report on your investment compliance. And you guys are playing it according to Hoyle. You're not doing any exotic derivatives or any of that stuff that would fall outside of the parameters. Those are great when you're making money, but they're really awful when things turn around and you lose money.
Well, first of all, thank you. You've been a great partner in helping keep us honest, and I want to thank Brian in front of the board. And he gets to be the bad guy sometimes around here, and he's always reminding us to cross our teeth, dot our i's, and tells me when I go astray. Sometimes right now, so I want to thank him in front of the
Really
board.
good. It doesn't tell you often enough.
You're not here all day. But no, it's good. It's a good news story. Thank you.
And I guess the last thing I'd like to say is we forget sometimes. We get all caught up as a profession with our importance as professionals and doing our audit, and we forget that we're a vendor and you're a customer, and we're selling and you're buying. And at the end of the day, we don't do a good enough job of thanking you for buying what we're selling, and we appreciate that. And I think it's important that we let you know that, because I don't think we remember that as often as we should, or communicate it enough. So thank you. You have other choices, and thank you for making us the choice. We appreciate it.
Knowing reviewing our financial position, I'm sure you're confident the check will clear and you'll be good.
I thought this was where the car came out.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a two-way street, though, that, you enjoy us as your customer, but we enjoy you as a vendor, knowing
Good.
that you're doing a professional job in
Well,
what
thank
you're
you.
doing. Roger, any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank
I
you.
mean, you gotta,
Well, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm ready to
sure.
go here. There's. We don't have to do anything other than
We have to
review.
accept it?
A motion
Accept the report?
Motion to accept the report.
so move.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Report is accepted.
Move on to the next item, which is
Well,
the...
we will take our leave from the meeting, so we should
Thank you very,
continue.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. It was a pleasure. Nice to see you.
Sure.
Section 2800, Public Authorities Law, Brian.
Okay, first up is the annual report per Section 2800 Public Authorities Law. It basically contains a number of the items, including critical elements of the financial statements that we report to the Albany on an annual basis. We also provide this to the heads of Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance. Basically, a number of items here. This is consistent year to year. There are no changes.
Move to accept the report.
So moved.
Second. Anyone? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Next is the Public Authorities Annual Investment Report, Brian.
In addition to 2800, there's also the annual investment report. Required under Public Authorities Law, contains the independent accountant's report on compliance with authority investment guidelines, our investment guidelines that we're required to adopt annually, and a record of our investment income. Again, consistent year to year, no significant changes.
Move to accept that report.
So moved.
Move. Second.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Finally, the Internal Auditor Report.
Okay, as part of the Internal Control Act, the authority is required to have in place a system of verification of internal controls. One of the primary mechanism that we utilize to support this requirement is the internal auditor. The internal auditor has gone out and performed their audit on 3 separate areas, total revenue and collections, facilities inspection, and maintenance and payroll. For this year, this is the first year since really contracting this out to a third-party auditor. The authority has had no findings this year, which is very good for us. Okay, it means we were doing exactly what we thought we were going to do, and they weren't able to find any exceptions. This is also a report that will appear on our website.
Is there a motion to accept the Internal Auditor Report?
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Second.
Discussion. Any? Yes, sir.
Next year, I think we ought to have this in color.
Sorry about that.
We'll make note of that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes. Is there any other business for the committee of the whole tonight? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn?
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Chairman, back to the regular order of business.
You did such a great job, Commissioner. Thank you very much. Now we're going to start our regular March 19th meeting in the New York State Bridge Authority. But before we do such, I'd like to introduce everybody. We have Commissioner Mr. Rod Dressel on my left. We have Commissioner Vane Lashua. We have Assistant Executive Director. Correct?
Yes, it's
Okay,
fine.
see that? Not here anymore. Tara Sullivan.
We noticed.
We have Commissioner Roger Higgins, we have our attorney, Mr. Whitback, we have our executive director, Mr. Ruggiero, and myself, Richard Jerrican. And also we have our different directors sitting on either side of the room here. With that, I'd like to adopt the regular board minutes of the February 19th meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Also, I'd like to make an amendment to the board meeting, the agenda for today. I'd like to, on number 2A, there is now a resolution with the original WIM agreement in New York State DOT. That's inclusive now. The agreement was there, I'm sorry. So the agreement is part of that resolution today and the backup information. Secondly, in the financial report, we're going to add B8 2012, Newburgh Beacon Bridge, North Span Paint, increase Hanks Construction Agreement, which we'll discuss later. And thirdly, we are going to change the Affordable Care Act compliance regarding the part-time seasonal to reports to be done by the executive director, and it was originally stated into the financial report, so we switched that over there.
Move to accept the amended agenda.
Any discussion? If not, second. All in favor, say aye. All right, Brian? No, I'm sorry, Bob.
Nope. The first item I have under administration is renewal of the authority's membership in the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, or the IBTTA. The dues for 2015 are based on a rate that's applied to our total revenue from the prior year, and so the amount of the invoice this year is $24,524, and I have a resolution for you to approve the payment of that invoice.
So moved.
Second? Second. Discussion, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Thank you. The next three items, I'll speak to individually, but they're all related. They're all annual reports that we're required to prepare, subject to the Public Authorities Law, and submit to Albany electronically and via direct mail to certain directors in Albany. These reports are also posted to our website, and they all have to be submitted by the end of March. The first one is our annual prompt payment report, which indicates any payments that were made as late payments and any fees that were assessed by a vendor accordingly. We had one minor payment that you'll notice in the report, and other than that, it was a null report.
Does this mean we have to report, for instance, if we have a disagreement, in other words, what we purchased from a vendor did not come through, and so we were in confrontation with them? Is that what
If we, for whatever reason, fail to pay something on time, incurred a fee because of it, we need to report that.
Yeah, not necessarily something that's in dispute, because that's pending until it's resolved. But this would be if we were to make a late payment, something we exceeded the due date or the payment terms of the vendor.
And I was the only one that got the bill stuck on the bottom of the heap.
We owe $1.34 full disclosure. I apologize. John won't ever do it again.
So I guess did you want to approve all the resolutions together?
Motion to approve that, please?
You want to do them one at a time?
Yeah,
or-
we're doing one at a time.
All right,
Okay.
so moved.
Discussion, now roll call, all in favor, say aye. Thank you.
All right, and the second one here is the annual procurement contracts report and procurement guidelines. Each year, the board has to reauthorize the procurement guidelines under which we operate. So they're attached to this with a resolution, as well as a listing. We have to report to Albany a listing of all single procurements or contracts that were $5,000 or more during the year, or that were carried over from prior years. So that's what that listing that's attached on the legal paper is. And there's a resolution associated with that to submit that report.
So moved.
Second? Discussion, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
And similarly, we're asked to reauthorize our disposal guidelines that dictate how we dispose of personal property. And so the guidelines are attached here as well as a resolution. And then we are required to report any disposals that we made with a fair market value of $5,000 or more. And this year, that fair market value is set by public auction. And we had two vehicles that brought in excess of $5,000. This year we did an auction. We did several auctions actually with an online vendor to give us a little bit more exposure outside of our local jurisdiction, our local area. So it actually worked out very well. It's Auctions International, which conducts a lot of municipal auctions, and so they have a fairly broad database of bidders. And so this is the report that will go to Albany, listing these two vehicles that were disposed, along with the listing of real property.
We're doing this instead of, we used to have an auction here.
We used to do on-site auctions, yeah.
Now you're doing.
But we'd get, maybe on a good auction, we'd get maybe 200 bidders, and, as the auction progressed, we had fewer and fewer bidders, especially if you had, larger items. This way, we're getting a large number of bidders that are seeing this, both across the state and even out of state.
When is the auction going to take place?
When is the auction taking? We had.
Plan on 157.15?
Yes, we'll have another. I don't have one set yet. We just had one that ran, it closed out on March 2nd. We got rid of, we didn't have any vehicles in that auction. We had just some surplus equipment, small equipment, mowers, things of that nature. But we don't have another one set yet. We've actually, with that auction, I think we had 4 auctions, three that ran in 2014 and one that ran early this year. And of those 4 auctions, we pretty much disposed of all the surplus equipment that's on all of our sites. So we're in good shape.
Do you want to move it?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jeff,
Good afternoon.
how are you?
Good. Yourself?
Anybody picking on you? Survive it?
We're hanging in there.
He's almost through his initiation. We got a few more weeks of it. He's there.
I survived the fraternity at
You
college.
did.
I'm dead.
You're going to do phase 2, though.
Yeah, it wasn't SAE, was it?
No. All right, first up is the WIM station agreement. As you know, we've been dealing with the weigh in motion technology for many years here with DOT, and they finally have secured their funding and are prepared to finalize a bid package and advertise for RFPs this summer for construction at I-84, just east of our bridge. Our commitment is for $200,000, which the board approved back in January of 2013, and now we're asking for approval for us to execute the agreement with the DOT. So,
Second?
Second.
Discussion, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
next is the system-wide intelligent transportation system engineering consultant. Our current contract expires at the end of the month with TransDigm. We advertise for bids for a 3-year term and 2 additional terms, year extensions. Capsch is the parent bidder that we'd like to go with. We have a not to exceed $97,804 preventative maintenance program that they've bid on. It will be billed on an hourly rate. This is down from the current $144,000 lump sum contract that we currently have. So we're saving some money, and we'd like to enter into a contract with Capsch.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Excuse me, could I go back just on the weight? I had a note on my other one here. We're authorized, we're gonna be putting in $200,000. This is on the weight.
The way in motion.
Way in motion.
Now, okay, so this truck, once this is implemented, and there's a truck overweight, and the troopers, and there's a fine, are we gonna get a piece of the money?
Probably
Well,
not.
why are we
Well,
putting
we have a-
200,000?
we have a- we have a
I know we
fee.
don't want overweight trucks on the bridge, but I would think that we ought to get a piece of that action.
Well, we do have a fee that we get paid as well, so we'll still get our fee, I think. We just won't get the fine.
It'll also help us flag vehicles that are likely overweight when they come across the bridge so that we can go and take a second look. So it's going to give us a heads up. We're going to get a data feed from them as gonna show us, hey, this truck is likely coming and, it's overweight, or it exceeds a threshold, and if it doesn't have a permit, then our normal procedures would kick in.
You understand what I'm saying? In other words,
But by us getting...
we're investing
We're-
some
Our
into
fees,
it.
we're
our
getting-
fees will increase.
Well, I mean,
Right,
sure, it's
right.
gonna preserve the bridge, I understand, but $200, that's pretty...
Rather than
Something money.
a truck paying just the normal semi-truck fee, they'll have to end up paying the overweight fee, which is quite a lot more. So it may not be a fine, but we collect more money for that
We'll
truck
get a
going
lot,
across
a
the
lot
bridge.
more of our overweight fees than we're getting now.
Okay, so we are gonna be getting the
We'll
piece of
see.
of the
It's
$200
$800.
investment we're putting
Right.
into it,
It's an $800 fine fee
which we probably we don't get now.
occasionally.
An overweight truck
Identify it, sure. This
pays $800?
If they don't.
Like the wide loads and things
If they
like-
don't schedule it and go through the
Yeah.
process, they
Right.
show up on the bridge and unscheduled,
If they
they
show
come
up
across
unannounced.
and they get an $800 fee at the toll
Well,
booth.
it'd be interesting to monitor that. I mean, it would almost pay to have somebody, if the scale, for lack of a better term, shows that, you're getting these things on a regular basis, my God, it would pay to almost have a staff person available in anticipation of them coming.
That's why they're doing it automatically and it's being
Yep.
done.
Yep, good.
It's a coordinated effort between us, the Thruway, the DOT, for this whole, it's happening on the state.
We just get the fee, though, we don't get any part of the fine at all, that goes to the towns and to the state.
We will be okay.
But I mean,
That's true.
from what I remember.
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
In Down Newburgh, the city of Beacon probably will get some part of that fee.
It's not official, it's on there.
Okay, come on, Jeff.
Next is the system-wide weather station expansion and upgrades. Right now, we have 3 automated weathering stations at Bear Mountain, Kingston, and Rip Van Winkle. Those stations monitor the temperature of the deck and traction on the deck. We want to expand that system so that we can also monitor the wind velocity and then add stations at Mid-Hudson and Newburgh Beacon so that all the bridges have the same capability and will be closely monitored, especially for wintertime operations.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye?
Next up is treadle procurement. We'd like to purchase 5 new fiber optic replacement treadles. The current systems are being phased out of production by the manufacturers. So we'd like to purchase 5 new fiber optics for replacement treadles.
So moved.
What's the life expectancy?
Treadles, at least 5 years or more, for sure. These are now fiber optic, so we're hoping they may last longer than the old treadles.
Somebody put a second, please? Second. All in favor, say aye?
Aye. Newburgh Beacon lane use signal procurement. We'd like to purchase 18 new lane use signals. Those are the X's and arrows you see over the lanes down there. We're in the process with the redecking job. We'll be replacing some. They need new faces every once in a while, so this is a normal budget thing that we tend to do.
So moved.
Second?
I would just say that, our signage is so much better. I traveled around Florida here a couple weeks ago, and the signage approaching the bridges, the one I pulled up didn't know what it was till the sign was right here by the toll taker. So obviously, you have a big bill ready, because then you didn't know what the toll was. But I would say, it's very important that us locals, sure, we know what our bridges, what people crossing them know, but for tourists and travelers, why, it's nice to have that signage up there, so that it runs smoothly through, because I can imagine there's gotta be some people scratching in their pockets with money.
Same thing
You have run all the time.
The
Even though
internal,
you've got it clear up here.
the same thing goes for the internal signage in Kingston, for instance. I was coming up to Hudson, and In Kingston, there's a place where you come over a hill and there's like 3 arrows. They're going like this. Which one's the throughway? Which one is it? And you don't find out till you get into the intersection. And it doesn't apply to our bridges. We've really got fairly good signage. Although I noticed a number of Newburgh Beacon Bridge that are out, or they're halfway there, or they're having troubles.
Hence the memo.
That's right.
That's what it is.
Any other discussion? If not, roll call, all in favor, say aye. Aye. You need a second? Rod?
I second.
Have it? Sure. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jobs in progress, basically it's the redecking job is starting to gear up again for our last season, and hoping to see that go smoothly.
Move to accept the jobs and progress report.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Brian?
So first up would be the monthly investment report. There were 6 investments for the month of February, all of which, again, continued fairly low yields. They're all reflected in the investment inventory report. To note, Tim identified that our net position had actually declined, but it didn't decline as much as we expended in bond proceeds. The reason being is you'll notice that year over year the maintenance reserve fund has increased the balance, so our pay-go is in a lot better shape. In any case, also our interest income and yield, our yield is rising as a result of the fact that we're expending the bond proceeds, which were all invested with short maturities, and a larger part of our portfolio is now invested in longer terms, so we're seeing better yields.
Move to accept the investment report.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next up would be the 2014 annual report per section 2800 that was discussed in the Audit and Finance Committee of the Whole. Again, same items. It's very similar to last year.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Next up, same principle, the annual investment report, discussed also in the Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? If not, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the last item is...
Brian, skipping public authorities.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry. You're right, I did. Something got caught in a paperclip. I apologize. Okay. The annual payment to Department of Civil Service. Every year we go and pay for the services or allocated percentage. It's based on head count. This year we're down from 21,428 to 21,025, a slight reduction.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
I apologize. Okay, the last item up is an amendment to the HACS construction inspection agreement. Originally, 3 years ago, the board approved a $1.5 approximately $1 million budget for the contract. Unfortunately, Kiska work exceeded the original schedule. It extended extended into December when we originally had anticipated it being done beforehand. To go and close this out, it would be an incremental $4,000 on the $1.5 million.
This is for the paint project.
For the paint project, yes.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Human resources, nothing. Information technology, nothing. Bridge operations, nothing. Reports to the board from the executive director.
Okay, you have my monthly expense report with no expenses to report. You have the February 2015 traffic revenue analysis report, the 2015 Easy Pass sales analysis report, and I gave the board, we could take those first, then we'll get to the other item. Year-to-date Easy Pass tags are, I think we're plateauing in the saturation of our Easy Pass market share, so we're seeing a drop-off from tags to prior year. But year-to-date, program-to-date, we're almost at 20,000 Easy Pass tags that we've sold in the lane, which is quite phenomenal, and we've moved the market share to 70% almost across the entire system now from the mid-50s just 4 or 5 years ago, so that's a positive step. Traffic and revenue, traffic is up a bit, revenue is up. So despite a very difficult February, we're doing we're doing well in that regard. And, you know, Treadle Modify keeps producing the positive cash flow back into the system. In the year-to-date, program to date with the Treadle Modified has brought in over $431,962 into the Bridge Authority, whereas before that would have been lost revenue if we hadn't had the Treadle Modified. So that's all good news in this report. It's just for your information. Keep it on file. The next thing is I know the board, when you're out and about, you get asked a lot of questions about the Bridge Authority, and we have a new Deputy Secretary of Transportation up in Albany who we report through to the Governor's Office. And we prepared a progress report of where we are in different aspects of the Bridge Authority in terms of quick facts, finance, engineering, operations, security, and so on. It's for your information, and we're going to make it available on our website to the public, and I just wanted the board to have this information today as a report.
Thank you, Joe.
Is this going to be on the website?
Yes, it is going to be on the website. The other item, as 2015 embarked, I asked General Counsel to review the Affordable Care Act law, and as it applies to us as what they would call a large employer, and the impacts to us in implementing the ACA. As you know, we have full-time employees and part-time employees, and the federal government, by definition of the Federal Affordable Care Act, has redefined what a full-time employee is in terms of what they would be entitled to for health care, and that's been defined as 30 hours on the average over the course of a year. So the policy here before the board is to help clarify. There are some decision points we as an entity have to make, and this policy is adopted by the board, lays out those decisions within the CARE Act, how we apply the CARE Act to seasonal employees, part-time employees. We need to make sure that we offer 95% of the employees who are considered full-time employees health care. If we fail to do that, we could be subject to a fine based on our entire payroll. So we have reviewed the payroll, we reviewed the status of the casual toll collectors, the seasonals, and we are managing those hours to make sure we don't come out of compliance and get assessed a fine. And the policy we're asking the board to adopt here is to implement those management decisions so we basically continue to operate the way we do without being subjected to fines, fees, and healthcare. And I think that I didn't miss anything, right?
So how are you working it out as far as employees go?
Well, basically, we'll be limiting a number of casual toll collectors who work more than 30 hours a week.
Well, right now, contractually,
And seasonal people.
The union contract that we have says we're not supposed to schedule more than 24 hours a week for a part-time toll collector. That's by the work rules of our contract. So we schedule 24 hours. The thing to do is to manage that if they are picking up an additional shift from here to there because of call-ins or other things unforeseen, that we are now monitoring that over the average of the course of a year, they don't exceed 30 hours a week, and therefore we trigger that. So we have a tightening of that belt going on, as well as then how does this apply for our seasonal workers who do work for 40 hours a week for X amount of weeks. And because the law has some flexibility and you kind of almost define your success in some ways, I wanted the board to be on record of what our measurements were. Therefore, Brian and Wayne and others can measure these things, and Craig and our staff here. That way we understand how we need to operate. It's clearly spelled out. I mean, Carl's office did
How many seasonal, like summer, like students, so forth, do we?
28, 25, 28.
So moved.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Old business payment to broadband consultant. John, do you want to discuss this or?
you know, we have a fiber optic leasing program that has been generating some revenue for the authority. The consultant that helps arrange a number of those agreements is Broadband Consulting. Part of that agreement is that upon the successful completion of a new lease, that's how they get paid. This is the authorization to pay Broadband Consulting the total sum of $26,763 for what amounts to several years' worth of work on the QCS telecom contract, which generated $535,000 in change for the authority.
Found money.
Absolutely.
We just then need to approve our found money.
Because the amount exceeds 15,000, the total compensation exceeds more than 15,000, we want to bring it to the board, even though no single payment will exceed that amount.
Roger?
Move to accept.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
New
gentlemen.
business, thank you. Historical signage for Bear Mountain Bridge. Tara?
Thank you. As you know, the Bear Mountain Bridge turned 90 back in November. And this year, the Bear Mountain Bridge celebrates its 75th anniversary since it was purchased by the Bridge Authority. So these dual celebrations merit some sort of event. And Commissioner Lashua and I, on behalf of Historic Bridges of the Hudson Valley, have been doing a lot of research, and we realized that interpretive signage has never been established on any of our bridges. And the Bear Mountain Bridge is the perfect place to begin. As you have seen throughout the country, and certainly in New York State, interpretive signage represents many important historic recognition symbols and buildings. Here at the Bridge Authority, we need to do that for these great iconic structures. So we thought we would begin with Bear Mountain. Vane and I met with the Bureau of Historic Sites up in Albany, and they put together a wonderful proposal to put that all together for us. You see both the memo and the expenses. I've got detail if you'd like it. And we hope that you will approve this so we can get busy right away. And these will be done and installed by September, when the Harriman family will come and cut the second oven.
As you know, we've done a lot. We have a not-for-profit board that's been set up with some veterans and retirees of the Bridge Authority. Tara and I are ex officio members of it, as well as Carl. It's under our statutory authority to actually promote the history and the cultural significance of the Bridge Authority. And it's amazing the attention we are getting for doing what is the virtual museum and the traveling museum. And in doing so, one of the things that's been explained to us, our best museum pieces is not some bricks and mortar building we're going to build, it is the bridges themselves. And the lack of the story on the bridges that will be now told through these interpretive signs goes a long way to advancing the cultural promotion of the Bridge Authority. And considering all the, let's say, talk of where our authority should be in the future, I think telling its history and its story is significant. And every time we're out there, Tara, Vane, and I just went up 2 weeks ago up to Columbia Green Community College, where a local artisan just painted literally 107 bridges within 18 months of all the bridges across the Hudson River. You may have seen the article in your packet. And they were just thrilled to have us there and the promotion of the Bridge Authority. So there's a great story to be told. We're beginning to tell it, and I think the more we talk about it as the significance that these bridges had in transforming the valley, the northeast of the country, I think it's in its best interest of the Bridge Authority going forward.
And the educational opportunity that gives to the local schools, it's a place where kids, teachers, educational groups can get involved, so community groups, And the part of our mission statement is to promote the bridges, and I think this is one of the ways that it's been let go a bit
When
over
we,
50 years, and here
Well,
we
in
are.
fairness, it's the employees themselves who have hung on to the artifacts and the
Absolutely.
history through their own clippings of news articles and their man-made, roughly made displays in their own workshops that have really inspired for us to talk about the story. So it really is a legacy to their work and their pride of what they believe is the Bridge Authority, what they've known to be the Bridge Authority. So I think we have an obligation.
The historic bridges of the Hudson Valley, you guys all got the white paper about 6 months ago, and on the board, Chris Kelly and some other of the board members went to visit West Point, both the museum and the engineering school. And when they were met by this group of officials at West Point, the very first thing they said is, your bridges are some of the most remarkable structures in the Hudson Valley to American history, and nobody knows about it because you guys don't have signs up. Please think about getting some interpretive signs. So when we went to the Bureau of Historic Sites in People's Island up in Troy, we sat down with their group of people who make these signs, and we were telling the story, we fed them all the information, and then they said, not only are your bridges important, but the authority is important. And what we recommend is that every bridge, as you install these signs, you be sure that one sign talks about the bridge and the Bridge Authority's relationship to that bridge, because it is unlike any other entity in the United States, the way it has a collection of bridges, not a single bridge, and it has held these bridges in remarkable condition for a remarkable low toll, and that story needs to be told, not only to the region, but to the country.
And how the organization has worked in appropriate scale. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about consolidating authorities or consolidating responsibilities. This story needs to be told, that how this family actually over the years has maintained these bridges in a way that no other authority has maintained its infrastructure, and it's fantastic. That's one of the thrills I have of being a commissioner.
We're very passionate, so we could talk on and on, Commissioner.
After you move it, we're going to have a big group hug.
I guess we're gonna move it, huh? Moved by Roger. Zane? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great job, Tara. Zane?
Thank you.
Any attorney-client privilege? Adjournment, our next meeting is April 16, 2015, at 3 p.m. Move to adjourn, hold on.
No, just maybe before we should go, the bridges span both Ulster and Dutchess County. So I was wondering maybe you could give us your thoughts on how we will go into compliance with the new Ulster County styrofoam law, which I know that you're very supportive of.
No, I voted against.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry
no.
about that. So on this side of the river they can't, but if suppose you get a lunch and you want to take it on the other side,
You can throw it halfway across.
all right. Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Just gonna throw them in the river.
Did we want to just discuss the where do we stand, what's going on?
There is nothing going on. This was a news story, a reporter wrote up. There is not a piece of legislation anywhere talking about it anywhere. The governor hasn't proposed anything. Nothing introduced in either house. The only slight bill that may flirt with it is a one-house bill Senator Carlucci introduced to study the idea. There is nothing happening.
My concern is, though, that, there's only, the only representatives that are concerned about the Bridge Authority are representatives from Nyack to Catskill. All the rest of the representatives, and some and senators in New York State, travel the thruway more than they do the bridges. They really, if they could see their tolls on the thruway being cheaper, because the thruway, or the bridge authority got thrown in to help.
Wouldn't work.
Yeah, we're gonna be poor cousins. So my concern is, what, Fred, are we sure, just what you just talked about is gonna be a big help in showing how important that this organization stay
Here, here.
the way it is. But I have real concerns about some of them.
Rich wrote a letter.
Talk about the
Well, when the,
economics too, of
just-
the economics of the tolls.
Sure,
I
let
mean,
me just-
we're not gonna reduce the tolls at all.
Well, let me just address.
Reduce the toll?
Let
No, I
me,
mean, the tolls would not be reduced by incorporating the authority in the.
let me just
thruway.
address the
Wait,
commissioner's
we jacked
comments.
ours up.
When this story broke, Assemblyman Cahill, who is a senior member of this delegation, was very vocal and got statewide attention for his comments, and then it picked up a lot of the other comments from some of the other legislators. So I do think, even though it's a regional concern by our regional electeds, we have enough weight in both houses to discuss it, and I think the Bridge Authority, again, there's no movement on this. It was a news story, a reporter decided he wanted to write, and I wouldn't
The chairman's
overreact.
written a letter on our behalf, and we have our lobbyist quietly.
Well, we have a government relations person that monitors these activities for us. It's not anything we need to do overtly or covertly, it's not happening.
Oh, I think the commissioners, all the commissioners were concerned that it might happen this year, and I think it's something that might be on the horizon for future years that we should be concerned with. We know what we have here, how we operate here, the service that we give here, and the tolls, of course. And it would be very detrimental to the Hudson Valley residents if, we were taken over, because eventually I'm sure the tolls would not stay where they are. But I think we made it very clear to our people that represent us, they're on board, but who knows what the future's going to bring.
They made it very clear to us where they stood. I mean, they heard about the story, they spoke up, and we read their comments almost simultaneously with the report coming out, the reporter's story coming out.
Anything else? Nothing?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Thank you.